The Stoichea Nation has received a very powerful new Grade 3, and this card is insane. Over the last 2 weeks, Bushiroad has been releasing more leaks and support for the upcoming set in Card Fight Vanguard Overdress. Very recently, I did a video discussing my thoughts and opinions on the 2 new over triggers that are coming out in the set, and we got more support coming out with that as well. Being introduced to the by Bushiroad's monthly promo, which is Reminiscence Flower Maiden Claudine, this new Grade 3 is one that I'm going to discuss in today's video, and deck building and the future support that will be needed to make this card work. Now, Claudine is a promo card which is not part of the main set, so it's not going to be a card that we're going to see for a very long time, but it's something that is definitely out there and potentially could join us in English when we get the release of these new support cards for us. However, we don't have these new cards in English yet, so until we get the next wave of support or see the rest of the Stoichea support coming out, we're going to have some fun today and discuss my thoughts on Reminiscence Flower Maiden Claudine and how we can deck build for this card and it's going to impact Stoichea. Now, I've been ranting about this card for a while, but it's about time we get to the effect. So Reminiscence Flower Maiden Claudine's full effect has been revealed and it has the following. Act Vanguard Circle once per turn. Cost: retire 3 rear guards. Until end of turn, this unit gets continuous Vanguard Circle. All of your token units get power plus 5,000 and drive plus 1. Act Vanguard Circle once per turn. Cost: bind an order card from drop and call up to 2 plant tokens to rearguard circle. Auto Vanguard Circle. When this unit attacks, cost: Soul Blast 1. Choose one of your plant tokens and stand it, and that unit gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn for every 2 different order cards in total in your drop and bind zone. Now, Claudine has a lot of effects, but I think the most important thing about her is the restand and the +1 drive. This card is going to give us the ability to add additional cards to our hand by drive checking, which is the best manner of getting additional cards. It also applies a lot of power onto your plant tokens to make them really scary and hit magic numbers against your opponent. The other great thing about Claudine so far is the fact that she doesn't cost any counterblast. This is another Stoichea Vanguard that doesn't cost CB, which is huge for the deck, as we can allocate all of our other counterblast or other CB cost to other cards that have better effects that will just make Claudine a lot more consistent, as well as apply a lot more power and pressure, again for the plant token. Now, because we are Stoichea, we're going to have access to a lot of cards that are going to superior call from the drop zone, generate plant tokens, give us power, and we can do this in the form of normal units and order cards. This card is going to really be interesting to work with because you're going to have to balance out the support you want with order cards, as well as the support you want from your main deck cards to fulfill the strategy with Claudine, which is to stack as much power onto your plant token and swing for multiple times during each period of the game. You're also going to need to retire 3 rear guards, which is the only negative about this card, but because it has so many different Vanguard abilities, that's perfectly fine, as getting those 3 bodies to retire is not going to be hard to do. Considering the fact that Claudine herself gives us 2 plant tokens, that means that we're basically 2/3 of the way there for the cost of her ability. Now that we've discussed Claudine's effect, her winning image, as well as the idea behind building a deck for around her, I want to discuss some very popular ride lines that I think are going to synergize with her very well in the beginning of testing. And one of those ride lines is the most popular right now, which is the ZORGA ride line. Now, this ride line has really been popular in the Stoichea Nations and different decks as well. Being able to go into your Ranker Chain, then to your Black Tier Husk Dragon to generate extra card advantage in the early game is going to be extremely needed with the way that Overdress is looking in the future. On first glance, I personally believe the ZORGA ride line is going to become the most popular. Being able to take advantage of the fact that these cards put order cards in the discard pile while also adding cards to your hand in the early game is going to be needed for Claudine to make a proper play on her first turn, or it's going to be needed to make sure that we can rush against our opponent on their turn. As a lot of decks are moving towards early game rush to deal with these other decks that are coming out now, it's going to be extremely important to have the cards needed in your hands to either rush them back or to defend against all these attacks coming your way in the early game, so you're not in a lot of pressure or in the danger zone by the time you hit your first Grade 3. This is just the safest route to go with this deck. If you want to go a route where you're just getting early game card advantage and you're able to rely on the other pieces you have in the deck for your particular Claudine build, you can basically rely on these cards just to make sure that you have the pieces needed to go into the later game. But there is one more ride line that I think we should discuss, and the most obvious ride line besides the ZORGA ride line is the ROROWA ride line. Now, the ROROWA ride line is special because this ride line will automatically give you plant tokens and there will be no cost whatsoever associated with these cards. Because your only fault with this ride line is just having a plant token before going into your Grade 2 and then playing the Grade 0, that means that by the time you go into Claudine, assuming your opponent has not taken advantage of attacking those rear guards to gain benefits, you're going to go into her with 2 plant token rear guards. That is important because since Claudine's ability requires you to retire 3 rear guards, you're already going to have 2 of them taken up going to your first grade 3 ride, which means you only need 1 other rear guard to make sure that you can take advantage of Claudine's effect. Now, Stoichea has a bunch of abilities that allow us to call units back from the drop zone to the board, so it's not going to be an issue getting these cards, on top of the fact that we're going to have to play a lot of plant token generators for this deck as well. So therefore, getting bodies onto the board will not be something that is difficult, hence the reason why I don't think this ride line will be the most popular, but it's just another route you can go if you want to preserve soul with Claudine. Or if you feel as though getting a more aggressive variation of Claudine is the route you want to go, this is the best way to do that. I definitely do like the ZORGA ride line the most for Claudine because we haven't seen the future support of what Stoichea is going to get in the next set. But I think that just on an initial look, I think that these 2 ride lines are something people are going to have to test out. If you want a more aggressive route, you go through a ROROWA ride line so that you can get those plant tokens in the early game and rush with them, and then retire them for Claudine on first grade 3 ride. If you want more card advantage, then the ZORGA ride line is obviously the best route to go by getting rid of those useless orders early and then turning them into early game card advantage. Now that we've seen the ride lines that are applicable with Claudine, I want to look at some plant token generators that are also just going to be as good with her to synergize with just the ride lines as well. Keep in mind that Claudine's win condition is going to revolve around having a plant token as the restanding unit, so we're going to need ways of getting those extra plant tokens on board to retire for her effect, as well as be the target for her main skill. So I have chosen these 3 cards to be the best cards that are going to work with Claudine on initial release. Now, Claudine takes advantage of both order cards and soul. So the automatic 2 cards that are the standout here is the Horror Mushroom as well as the order card Prolific Orange. Now these cards, if you don't know what they do, Horror Mushroom has the effect of moving itself into the soul to call out 2 plant tokens. Then Prolific Orange has the ability on Counterblast, you get to call 2 plant tokens to rearguard circle. The grade 2 present is Prad Pollen, which has the ability, which is on Counterblast, call 2 plant tokens to rearguard circle. Now all 3 of these cards are going to synergize extremely well with Claudine. The Boru Mushroom has the ability to move itself into soul and give you 2 plant tokens. And since we know that Claudine is a Vanguard that relies on soul, this is going to be one of the ways where you basically kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Getting a soul charge as well as 2 plant token bodies on board for either targeting with Claudine's effect to retire or to target with Claudine's effect to get the restand means that we have another way besides Claudine's ability that's cost-free as well to get those extra plant tokens on board while filling up our soul. Prad Pollen and Prolific Orange are essentially the same card. Being a counterblast of 1 to generate 2 plant tokens, they both give the same benefit, but the way that you use them is very different. See, Prad Pollen is a unit card, which means it's going to stay on board and give us 2 plant tokens. This card will automatically give us the 3 rear guards we need to retire for Claudine's effect, but it's also a unit that we can retire for other card effects you might want to play, or it's a body we can have on board to rush in the early game when we go into our grade 2 turn with our ZORGA ride line or our ROROWA ride line, potentially getting more bodies on board to rush with, or just more cards we'll have set up for Claudine's first ability. But Prolific Orange is special because this card is an order card, so that means that we automatically have a different order card that will benefit us any period in the game with getting us 2 plant tokens onto the board, but it's also a target for our ZORGA ride line and for Claudine's ability since it is an order card that will apply power to our plant token. Without seeing future support for Claudine or Stoichea, these 3 cards are really amazing targets to consider for the deck. One puts itself into soul and gives you plant tokens, and then we have 2 cards that give you 2 plant tokens, but one is a body on board for Claudine, and then one is Prolific Orange. I think that these 3 cards are going to be really good staples that we'll probably see in any Claudine build in the future, unless the future support obviously changes that, but these are just really good cards to keep in mind when deck building for her because they all benefit the Vanguard in some way. And something I want to note now about Prad Pollen and Prolific Orange is because Claudine is not a Vanguard that requires Counterblast, your CB essentially is going to go to everything else that you want to play. So therefore we can use Prad Pollen as a staple for of because it automatically turns itself into the 3 card retire for Claudine, and we can have essentially 1 to 2 copies of Prolific Orange, and we can have 1 to 2 copies of the Mushroom to make sure that we have essentially 8 different ways in our deck to generate us plant tokens and utilize our resources to their full capacity. A bonus thought that I want to mention about these cards is the fact that none of these cards are grade 3 restricted. They are resource restricted like your Mushroom or your Pratt Pollen, but because they're not grade 3 restricted, any deck build that you apply with them will work. Whether it be ZORGA ride line or ROROWA ride line, all of these cards are going to benefit you in getting that early game rush or generating you extra card advantage later in the game. Now, these 3 units are the most popular staples of Stoichea, performing Petal Diantha having the ability to become a very strong booster at 13k base, while also giving us a rearguard from the drop zone means that we have a generic way of getting all of our rearguards accessible to us at any period in the game. Blue Artillery Dragon Inlet Pulse Dragon doesn't need an introduction, as this card essentially has seeped its way into every single Stoichea deck that exists. Plant Tokens and Claudine are going to be a multiple attack strategy going into the future of the Stoichea Nation. So being able to have a card that moves itself into soul and give us an extra draw means that we're going to be able to have our offense strong while being able to generate soul and card advantage. The card automatically solidifies itself as a staple piece of the deck for now. But the card that I really want to talk about that I think is going to be interesting for this deck is the grade 2, which is Coffin Shooter. Now, Coffin Shooter is not the most popular option right now, but is a tech piece I've always kept my eye on, as this card has the ability to Soul Blast 1, bind an order card from your drop zone, and call it to rearguard circle. Now, in this deck, there's a lot of applications we can do with that. So because we need our order cards in the drop zone or the bind zone to power up our plant token, the order cards that we have in the drop zone, we're not going to have much use for them besides either getting them back into our hand or just counting them up to the tally of our plant token ability. So Coffin Shooter being able to Soul Blast 1 and bind these order cards in our drop zone and put itself onto the board is going to be extremely helpful in any period in the game. We can drop our order cards in our hand early to call this card out so that we can rush with it. We can put this card back onto the board by binding a card from our drop zone so that we can retire 3 rear guards with Claudine, or if we need to bind another order card with Claudine so that we can get those 2 plant tokens and then Coffin Shooter, that's 3 bodies right there for essentially a free cost of just 1 card in the bind zone that counts to our tally for powering up our rear guard later in this game anyway. These 3 cards are just the current ideas and thoughts that I have for Claudine when it comes to main deck support. There still are a lot of options, and Stoichea has a lot of great resource management cards that we can look at to apply for Claudine later. But these 3 cards all do something right now that I think is going to help Claudine in the future. Now that we've discussed a variety of support cards that currently help Claudine for a deck, there is the question of order cards. Since Claudine requires you to have different order cards to stack the different levels of 5,000 power onto your plant token, we're going to have a lot of space to try a bunch of different order cards that will synergize with the deck. But these 3 order cards automatically caught my eye and are personal favorites of mine that I don't get the chance to try often, but I do think that they're going to synergize very well with Claudine. So the 3 order cards I think are going to work out very well for her right away are the following, which is Fun Marching, Gather Upon Me, O Ye Wandering Souls, and In Search of an Ideal Far Away. These 3 order cards all increase power and pressure with the Vanguard and your token units. Taking a look at our very first grade 1 order card, it is In Search of an Ideal Far Away. This order has the ability to apply 5,000 power to a unit when another rearguard attacks. Keep in mind that we're going to apply this effect to a booster, so that essentially means the booster will see 4 different attacks. So that's additional 20,000 power to the booster that's going to support the plant token, which will help make the plant token add a magic number because it's going to get 10,000 power from Claudine right away. Then we have Gather Upon Me, O Ye Wandering Souls. Now, Gather Upon Me, O Ye Wandering Souls is a card that applies additional drive to the Vanguard. Claudine already does this, but what makes this special is we can use our Gather Upon Me, O Ye Wandering Souls to put another order card into our drop zone, which is a very faster way of stacking order cards in the drop zone with different names since all of our orders have to be different. So that means that we're going to have more power going onto our plant token while applying additional drive to our Vanguard, who will check more triggers, which will make our token even scarier. Now, the last order card that I think is going to be extremely popular in this deck is Fun Marching. This is a Leonorn support card with the ability to Soul Blast 1 and apply 5,000 power to all of your grade 1 or lower units. Now, because Claudine has an ability that stacks 5,000 power onto your plant token units as well, that means that you're going to be giving 10,000 power to all of your plant token units, which will turn all of them into 15,000 point boosters. But if we have other grade 1s in play, those units will get 5,000 power as well. So you could potentially have an entire formation that has gotten 5,000 power from this effect. And if you're on a Persona Ride turn, or if you're just using Claudine's ability to power up your plant tokens, you're essentially giving potentially between 10 to 15,000 power to all of your cards when you apply the benefits of this card, its effect, and the order card in the same turn. This is not including the 10,000 power the front row gets from Persona Ride either. In retrospect, there are a lot of different order cards you're going to have to play with this deck anyway. As whenever I apply the ZORGA ride line to a deck, if that's the route I want to go, I want about like 6 to 7 different order cards, and I haven't already discussed the cards like Gradius Gradle, which will automatically activate Persona Ride. There's also Spiritual Body Condensation. There's In the Darkness We Search, which will get bodies onto the board, which is something important for us, and they don't cost CB, they cost soul, but give power. And then there's a bunch of other Stoichea cards and other normal order cards you can apply to the deck that I just can't think of at the moment, but those are just very generic ideas for this deck when it comes to its order card support. I think it's going to be very important that our order cards do things that actually improve our offense. Because we are using a plant token as the win condition, I really want as many ways as possible to make that plant token as scary as heck, because 5,000 power as a start, on top of giving 5,000 power from the Vanguard onto it, just makes it a 10,000 point unit. So by itself, it can't even hit a Vanguard that is a grade 3 unit. So we're gonna have to rely on a booster already to make it just hit a number. So I need other ways of making that plant token as scary as possible, besides relying on Persona Ride and boosters to make it work. I'm gonna need extra power, and I'm gonna need my Vanguard to be just as scary as my plant token, because we want to take as many cards away from them from their hand when they're defending against our multiple attacks. Because order cards are going to become the most flexible slots in this deck, I really do want people to take their time and look at the different orders that are going to improve this deck. I'm not familiar with any of the new order support that I've seen besides the grade 0 order card that I think actually is something I want to talk about in a separate video by itself. That is a good route to go when it comes to thinning out the deck for those order cards. If you want to play a lot more orders than like 6 or 7, that's a good route to go. But I think that for initial release, these 3 cards are going to be cards you're definitely going to want to check into the deck, as all of them do something offensively speaking that make the Claudine strategy just a lot more consistent and way more powerful than what it is on its own. Reminiscence Flower Maiden Claudine is a deck that I surely look forward to seeing it in the English format. I'm super excited to really get my hands on this card and test out all the other ideas and theories that I do have that I couldn't fit into this video. But now that we've reached the end of this discussion, tell me your guys' thoughts about Claudine. What are the deck profile ideas, or maybe card designs or ideas you'd like to see work with this card? I think that there's a lot of potential for this card to work in the meta because of all the great things that it does as a Vanguard alone. It's basically a combination of ROROWA, Granfia, and Leonore all into one card. Utilizing plant tokens for extra offense or as resources for your abilities is a very natural strategy for a lot of Stoichea decks now that we are following. But I am looking forward to hearing your guys' response and ideas on what you're going to do with Reminiscence Flower Maiden Claudine once you get your hands on it. With that being said, card fighters, y'all have a great day, and I will see you soon. Peace.